How's everybody doing today? Hotep, hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, writer, and historian. So it is Wednesday, January 29th, 2020. And we're live. Hope everybody's doing well today. Share this broadcast on your Facebook page, share this on your social media platform, share it on YouTube. So I saw this story on January 28th, and I shared this article from Madam Noire on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and we got a lot of response. And I've heard of things like this taking place and happening, in the past. So I want to talk about this, and this goes to something deeper. It goes to our values, our interests, and our principles, and understanding how you only protect what you respect. You only protect what you respect. So we're going to deal with African-American artists pass up Black media at the Grammys. We know the Grammys took place Sunday, January 26th. And it was the lowest rating Grammys in 12 years also, okay? But you just a side note. But Black artists pass up Black media at the Grammys. And this is disappointing, but it says a lot more about what we think about ourselves, okay? So everybody share this broadcast. We're going to get deep into this. Then also African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. And our current promotion, which we have going on for a few more days, is buy 1 month, get 2 months free. So Madam Noire has this article, video of Black artists passing up all the Black media at the Grammys is a disappointing sight to see. So I read the entire article a couple of times, and I also watched the video as well. So in the article, it talks about the Grammys taking place this past Sunday. There were plenty of winners. It talked about Lizzo. So Lizzo's from Detroit. We posted an article about Lizzo winning. She won 3 Grammys. So congratulations to Lizzo. And it talked about how Black media lost out on the red carpet. Black media lost out on the red carpet. So there were 4 or 5 African-American owned. This is important to understand. We're not talking about African-American targeted media. We're talking about African-American owned media. There were only 4 or 5 African-American owned media outlets that were there at the Grammys to cover the Grammys. And they are usually at the end of the red carpet, okay? They're usually clustered together. So when we look in the article, it talked about Black Tree Media, okay? Black Tree Media, the CEO of Black Tree Media is Jamal Finkley, okay? And he talked about how Black Tree Media has covered the Grammys for the last 14 years, right? And he said he was present there at the Grammys with their camera crew on the big night and captured plenty of disappointing video of African-American artists walking past them and the few Black media correspondents who were all thrown together at the end of a long red carpet. So Jamal Finkley, CEO of Black Tree Media, said, quote, "There's a struggle, especially for Black media, okay? The struggle is multifaceted." So he laid out 3 points that they have to contend with, especially at the Grammys, okay? He laid out 3 points they have to contend with. First, there's the placement that Black media is on the end of the carpet, okay? So a lot of times they show these pre-award show specials, and you see them walking down the red carpet, and all the media outlets are taking pictures of them and calling out their names, trying to get the artist or celebrity to come over to an interview with them. And the artists oftentimes are guided by their publicists. The artists are oftentimes guided by their publicists. Usually their publicist is someone who is white, okay? So that is an obstacle right there. So the first thing Jamal Finkley laid out is there's the placement that we are on the carpet, which is usually we're all bundled near the end of the carpet. Secondly, is the publicists that represent the talent, which you'll see in some of these videos. Because in this article, they have a video at the end that they put on YouTube, and you get to see exactly what happened in African-American artists just walking on by. Okay, and then thirdly, it's the talent themselves who make conscious efforts or lack of effort to take time to speak to the few Black-owned media, all right? So oftentimes, I hear a lot of people say we need to build our own, we need to build our own. Very few times do they say we need to support our own. I hear a lot of people say we need to build our own. We need our own media. We need to own this. We need to own that. Very, very few times do they say we need to support our own, okay? We do have African-American media, African-American owned media. Now we need more of it, okay? So just for example, I put together a list, and these are just a few. This is not all inclusive. News1.com, it's Kathy Hughes. TheGrio.com, which is owned by Byron Allen. AtlantaBlackStar.com, New Amsterdam News, Essence Magazine, Essence Magazine and Essence.com. It was originally African-American owned and operated, then they sold the company. And Richie Lou Dennis, who sold Shea Moisture, he bought it a couple of years ago. He's from Liberia, so it's Black owned once again. BlackAmericaWeb.com, okay, as well, which is also Kathy Hughes. BlackAmericaWeb.com has a lot of African-American owned content. And that was started by Tom Joyner and Roland Martin, BlackAmericaWeb.com. They still exist. We post articles from Black America Web on a routine basis. Ebony Magazine, even though it's not owned by Johnson Publishing Company anymore, it's still owned by an African-American company out of Texas, Ebony Magazine, ebony.com. You have Roland Martin Unfiltered, his daily digital show. We share the daily digital news show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. Roland interviews. He covers a number of different topics. He goes to a lot of events dealing with all different types of things, and he covers that as well. And then we also have Aspire TV, which is owned by Magic Johnson. Okay, it's on cable, Aspire TV. We have TV One on cable, which is owned by Kathy Hughes. Revolt TV, owned by Diddy. All right, and then Bounce TV. Now, Bounce TV is broadcast television. It was originally African-American owned, but I think it was sold about 2017. I was doing some research a few weeks ago on Bounce TV, so I'm not clear if it is still African-American owned, okay? Then we have Black Enterprise Magazine, blackenterprise.com, still African-American owned and operated, owned by the Graves family. It was Earl Graves Sr. and Butch Graves, okay? So these are African-American owned, not targeted, like the root.com is African-American targeted, but it's gone through a number of different companies that owned it. It's currently owned by a Hispanic owned company. So even though the root, and it's not an attack on the root, I'm just showing you the difference. Even though the root targets the African-American community, we don't own it, okay? Just like BET. BET target Black entertainment television. It was founded by African Americans, okay, but it was sold to Viacom. All right, so Viacom is a white-owned company. Viacom owns BET, Her. It owns MTV, VH1, things like this. Okay, so we have to understand the difference between African American targeted media and African American owned and controlled media. All right, so. I watched the video, and the video is, really disappointing as well, because the other thing that we have to understand is when these artists get in trouble, when they get attacked, something happens, a scandal happens, things like this, and they're getting lambasted in white-owned media, you're going to need African-American-owned media to come to your aid and support you and allow you to get your information out, okay? Allow you to get your side of the story out, okay? So this is extremely important to understand. Okay, so Jamal Finkley, CEO of Black Tree Media, he laid out 3 grievances to really give people some insight on this. Okay, so then he said, as he pointed out, The article goes on to say, as he pointed out, there is not more than 4 or 5 Black media representatives on the red carpet at one time out of a sea of non-Black ones. But by the time celebrities get past the major white publications at the beginning of the red carpet, they, along with their publicists, zone out. So they start ignoring them. They're trying to hurry up and get inside, okay? Get inside of the actual theater. So Jamal Finkley can be heard in the video telling the likes of rappers Gucci Mane and Quavo of the Migos, quote, don't just do People magazine. Don't just do People, okay? Now, interesting enough, both men's names popped up for interviews secured with Billboard magazine that night as well. Other stars who walked past were her, Questlove. Now, at least Questlove did shake the brother's hand and say, look, I got to get inside. I got to get inside. Some other ones didn't even respond to them, didn't even say anything to them, just kept walking past, okay? So other stars who walked past were her, Questlove, Lil Nas X, and reportedly Rick Ross. Now, rapper Gunna did stop with his publicist, but wasn't able to answer questions for long, right? So Jamal Finkley went on to say, been doing it too long to continue to watch this BS happen. Okay, and in the comments of the video that they posted on YouTube, and once again, this article, so when I did my Facebook post of this article, I said, be sure to watch the video at the end of the article. Read the entire article, then watch the video at the end of the article, because people who are not in the industry may not really understand how these things work, what actually happens. And I used to guest host Roland's national daily radio show when he was doing his nationally syndicated radio show. So I was doing my nationally syndicated radio show, the Michael Imhotep Show on the Empowerment Radio Network. Roland comes to our network for a period of time. So when he couldn't do his show, I would guest host for him, okay? And I interviewed Flex Alexander and Shanice Wilson. Okay, so we know Shanice had the song years ago, I Love Your Smile, right? And I was interviewing them about their reality show they had on Oprah Winfrey Network, okay? And Oprah Winfrey Network is another network. Now she doesn't 100% own, but she owns, I don't know the percentage that she owns in it, but she still owns a percentage of OWN, okay? So I'm at this point, I'm not even certain she owns the majority of it. I don't know, but she owns more of it than I do. So I'm not knocking her. I'm just saying, I don't know. Okay. But I remember I was interviewing Flex Alexander and Shanice, and their publicist was on the phone with me. We're doing a telephone interview. Their publicist is on the phone, and the publicist says something like 2 minutes or 2 minutes left or something like that. But their publicist keeps track of their time. Okay. Their publicist directs them to certain media outlets, and they keep track of their time. So Jamal Finkley went on to say, been doing it for too long to continue to watch this BS happen, okay? He said, quote, each of these award shows cost Black Tree Media $1,500 to cover it, and to see people just ignore us for white media is ridiculous. He said they're thirsty for that 30 seconds on a white outlet while ignoring 4 Black outlets, maybe 5. Maybe 5 Black outlets. He said, like, you can't make the time, sis or bro. He said, we're here to cover you, okay? Now, once again, you only protect what you respect. You only protect what you respect. When we support African-American owned media or don't support African-American owned media, it shows what we think of them and how we value them, okay? And once again, as I said before, I hear a whole lot of people saying we need our own, but most of them don't say we need to support our own. There's a big difference. You know, there's a difference between attending the grand opening and continue to support that business. Because if they don't get the support, you're going to have a grand opening and a grand closing. So let me show you this quickly. I'm going to come back to this article. I want to show you all something quickly here. This is where understanding history comes into play. All right. How's everybody doing? Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in also. Follow us here on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And for those that don't know, I'm Michael Imhotep, the founder and owner of the African History Network. I'm also the host of the African History Network show that comes on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation, WFDF in Detroit. So those that may wonder, so the radio station is not African-American owned and operated, right? We did have an African-American owned and operated station here in Detroit. And I ain't gonna say who owned it. I'm not gonna say the company that owned it, but even though I had been on the station numerous times over the course of 2 years, they never offered me a show. You know, just in case you were wondering, it ain't like I didn't pursue a show, but they never offered me a show. So that's a whole nother story. All right. Let me turn on the screen share. I want you to see this slide here. So if we look at our history, and let me scroll down to it here. So let's look at this slide first. This deals with the pyramid principle. Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor James Small, who are two of my teachers, two of our Grandmaster Scholar Warriors. When they teach, they talk about the pyramid principle. And this deals with our values, our interests, and our principles, okay? So a pyramid has three sides. This is the pyramid of Khafre at Giza in Kemet or Egypt. And our foundation is African history and culture. It's African history and culture that gives us our values, our interests, and our principles. It gives us a cultural paradigm that we see reality through, okay? Our values and interests and our principles tells us what has value, what does not, what we should support, what we should not support, okay? You only protect what you respect. If you value white-owned media more than African-American-owned media, what does that say about yourself? What does that say about how you think about yourself? What does that say how you think about your people? Okay. It's our history and culture that gives us our self-esteem, our self-development, our self-worth. Our history and culture influences our economic empowerment, our economics, and our political empowerment, our politics. If this foundation is not in place, it does not matter how much money we have. We will continue not to utilize it to empower our people, and we'll continue to spend 97% of our dollars with people that don't look like us. So this is why, even though I'm all for economic empowerment, the correct foundation has to be in place. We can't engage in economic empowerment and political empowerment with a Eurocentric mindset. This is what a lot of people don't understand. This is why Dr. Claude Anderson is another one of my teachers. I've known him for years, done a number of interviews with him. I'm going to contact him because I usually interview him either in January or the beginning of February to give us our marching orders for the year. And since this is a election year, this is a critical year, 2020. This is a crucial year right here, okay? I'm going to set up an interview with him very soon. We'll do it here on Facebook Live. But even with Dr. Claude Anderson, I told Doc, I said, look, one time we were having a conversation, and I said, Doc, the foundation, I said, he talks about his 5-story building. I said, Doc, there's actually 6 stories. The foundation is African history and culture. Because if that foundation is not in place, we could be operating based upon a European cultural paradigm, right? And it doesn't really benefit our people. The other thing that we have to understand, and you've seen some of my previous broadcasts dealing with this, is we can confuse Black capitalism with cooperative economics. When we talk about economic empowerment, the way you engage in economics is based upon a cultural paradigm. Black capitalism, even though, yes, we should support, African-American owned businesses, things like that, Black capitalism reduces the positive impact that the economics will have on the community compared to cooperative economics. The co-ops, the cooperatives, where the members are owners, the co-ops have a different purpose. It comes from a understanding of economics, which are principles we brought with us from Africa. It's a totally different understanding because you're operating based upon a different cultural paradigm. You're operating based upon a cultural paradigm coming out of African culture. So if you read the book, and I don't have time to get deep into this, But I did a broadcast in December 2019, and we did it with Kwanzaa, and I go deeper into this dealing with cooperative economics. Okay, but if you read the book, and it's here, I got 4 stacks of books next to me, so just give me a minute. If you read the book Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Nimhard, okay, it goes deep into this because it deals with our deep, rich history of cooperative economics and the co-ops that we own, the Colored Farmers Union, the Free African Society of 1787, different things like this, the Colored Merchants Association of about 1927 or so, which comes out of the Negro Business League, which was founded by Booker T. Washington in 1900. We have a deep, rich history of entrepreneurship, of economics, but it's operating based upon the collective. And when you disrupt the cooperatives, you disrupt the cooperation. So it's an entirely different understanding based upon a different cultural paradigm. Okay, so this is something that we have to understand, which goes back to that foundation, the values, the interests, and the principles. Okay, so let's continue here. How's everybody doing? We got Kiori, Cynthia, Loretta, Anthony, just a few of the people watching. If you'd like this type of information, also, you can support us. You can donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. Or we have Cash App now, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App. And then also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, my DVD lectures are there as well. Okay. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, so let's go back to this article. So it goes on to say that there were a few artists, a few African-American artists who came over to speak with them and answer questions with Black Tree Media. So Jamal Finkley was able to speak with some talent, some artists, including Misty Copeland, okay? Misty Copeland, the ballerina. Now, what's interesting is Misty Copeland, this is not an attack on her, don't get me wrong, don't take this the wrong way. Misty Copeland is half white, but she thought enough of them to come over and speak with them and take questions from them. Okay, I'm just saying, just pay attention to this, right? But more people walked by than they did stop by for one question. More people walked by than the numbers who stopped by for one question. While it's understandable that people may need to get inside of the Grammys, get inside of the show by a certain time, enough time should be allotted to speak with more than just the mainstream media outlets, or don't speak to any. In addition, it is somewhat hypocritical that some of these same artists and names are outspoken about feeling like their work is not respected or properly acknowledged by the Recording Academy because it is Black or African American, or want to acknowledge poor treatment of African Americans in general, but they won't give the time of day to people who help them build their name before becoming part of the quote unquote A-list. So the same media outlets that were covering you when you were on your way up, now that you're part of the quote unquote A-list, now possibly you don't want to talk to them. We have to understand these media outlets are businesses. Once again, let's look at this. We talk about we need our own. We don't say we should support our own. These media outlets have equipment to purchase. They have to pay for travel to travel to these events. They pay people's salaries. These salaries pay for people's mortgages, their rent. People put food on the table, provide for their families. Okay? These businesses are not charities. These businesses have financial obligations each month. These businesses are not charities. Okay, we can't look at these businesses as people's hobbies and then look at People Magazine and E! Entertainment and things like this as real businesses. These are real businesses also. But you only protect what you respect. So the article goes on to say, and before you go about talking about Black media being quote unquote messy, the reputable sites they tend to flock to, from People Magazine to E! Entertainment and Entertainment Tonight, often focus on the same angles and drama they specifically point the finger at Black reporters about. At the end of the day, if they can stop by for those publications and sites, what would it hurt to give your own people the chance for at least one question? As previously mentioned, it's disappointing, but not surprising at this point. There is hope, though. If you recall, Halle Berry made time for 2 Black journalists at the premiere of John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. And so we know she co-starred in John Wick Chapter 3. One of those 2 Black journalists that she talked to, it was from Black Tree Media. After her, and now this took place, so I remember when this happened. Roland Martin covered this. He reported on this on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And the African-American female journalist who Halle Berry came over to talk to, she did a YouTube video talking about this and how much it meant to her for Halle to come over, even though Halle's publicist claimed that Halle Berry did not have time to come talk to them. Halle said, I can't skip my quote, I can't skip my brother and my sister. Halle Berry made it a point to come over and talk to these 2 African-American journalists after her publicist said that she didn't have time to do it, because in general, the publicist works for the artist. It's not the other way around. So if the artist says, look, I'm going to talk to them, they can do that. The publicist works for the artist. The artist don't work for the publicist. The artist does not work for the publicist. The publicist works for the artist. So I saw the video of the African-American female journalist talking about what it meant to her for Halle Berry to come over. And see, things like this, when they put stuff like this on YouTube, this generates views, it generates revenue for them. Okay, it helps these companies out tremendously. So, and once again, now keep in mind, this is not an attack, but Halle Berry is half white also. But she thought enough of African-American media to come over and talk to this brother and sister. So that was at John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, the premiere of that. And as Jamal Finkley went on to say, as Halle Berry made clear, quote, I can't skip my brother and my sister, end quote. And he said, and that gesture meant a lot more than Halle Berry realized to the reporters she spoke to, okay? Hopefully, soon enough, other stars of color will take a stand in the same way, especially since it doesn't require very much at all, okay? Hashtag, he closes the article, hashtag Black Media Matters, hashtag Black Media Matters. So what happens is we have to have a total rewiring of how many of us think. And at the root of that is African history and culture, which gives us our foundation, okay? African-American media, they should be the first people you speak to. African-American media should be the first people you speak to. The African-American owned media should not have to beg African-American artists to do interviews with them. Let's look at this quickly here, okay? And because once again, everybody says we need our own, and really don't understand this history. Okay, so let's go back to the screen share. I want to show you this slide here. And these are things I cover in my African American History Month presentations as well. So we have owned African American media for decades, okay? So this is not a new concept. The problem is many of us don't understand this history. So let's look at this slide here. Okay. We look at Oscar Micheaux, right? And after the movie The Birth of a Nation comes out February 8th, 1915, we're putting out movies that are in response to the movie The Birth of a Nation. African Americans fight back against negative images by producing our own movies. African Americans have been making our own movies since the movie The Birth of a Nation came out in 1915. We had about 150 production companies, some completely owned by African Americans, others partly owned by African Americans, that produced our own movies. So this is not new. So Tyler Perry has a new studio in Atlanta. Okay. And that's good. But what people don't understand is that we were making movies and we have production companies. Now, I don't remember specifically if we had, if we owned studios. I know we had two theater chains, the Lincoln Theater chain and the Lafayette Theater chain. But I do know we own numerous production companies, and we were producing our own movies, our own content. There was a whole genre of movies called race movies, R-A-C-E, race movies. Okay, I'll come back to that in just a minute. So we had about 150 companies, some completely owned by African Americans, others partly owned by African Americans, that produced our own movies. So this is not new. Oscar Micheaux is the most well-known director of that era. From 1918 to 1948, Oscar Micheaux produced 44 movies. Okay, read this book, Blacks in American Films and Television, an illustrated encyclopedia by Donald Bogle. Blacks in American Films and Television, an illustrated encyclopedia by Donald Bogle. Okay, that book came out in 1988. All right, now Donald Bogle is known as the father of Black cinema. Okay, and Donald Bogle Donald Bogle is brilliant. I've read his books. Okay. So this is a copy of that book, Blacks in American Films and Television, an illustrated encyclopedia by Donald Bogle. This is from my personal library. Okay. This was in one of the 4 stacks of books I have next to me. This book came out in 1988. I think it's out of print. Try to get it from your African-American owned bookstore, or if you can't get it there, Amazon. This book shows you, it has, what it does is it breaks down all the movies and TV shows up to about 1988 that had a significant African-American character in it, plot, something like that, okay? And it goes through, it gives you a synopsis of the movie, it tells you who starred in it, all of it, everything, okay? It deals with TV shows and movies, okay? And then in the beginning, it has history, okay? So for instance, let's look at this here. I was just looking at one. Okay, this deals with, let's see, one page I have bookmarked here. Because I study media. See, my degree is in business administration with a major in marketing. Marketing deals with media. So I was studying, history and media and the impact of it. I'm studying that for 27 years. But I was studying this in college. All right, so for instance, we have Cabin in the Sky, Bustin' Loose, Bucktown, 1975, Bustin' Loose, Cabin in the Sky, right? So it has entries for all of these, gives you background information, the director who starred in it, what is the movie about. They have pictures in here as well. So that's page 42 and 43. Page 44, this is some of the cast members of Cabin in the Sky, Lena Horne, Eddie Rochester Anderson, who was on the Jack Benny show as Rochester, and Ethel Waters. Okay, Ethel Waters was one of the 3 women who played Beulah on the TV show Beulah, which was about the maid Beulah. Okay, so this is a lot of history here, but on page, let's see, that citation that I made in the slide I showed you, that is from page 3. Okay, and on page 3, he says, At the same time, though, independent filmmakers working outside Hollywood released a different kind of product, race movies. All Black features made especially to please a Black audience. Race movies had first appeared during the silent era in the aftermath of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, okay? David Wark Griffith. The movie, The Birth of a Nation, and if you watch my lectures, I deal with this. My lecture, Black Migration, 1619 to 2019, I go into the movie, The Birth of a Nation, because this helps to change a lot of things. And this is at the beginning of the beginning of the Great Migration of 1915 to 1970. We had 6 million African Americans migrating from the South up north, and then eventually going out west as well. 1915 is the 50th anniversary of the Civil War ending, the 50th anniversary of the 13th Amendment, and chattel slavery being made illegal, and 4 million African American slaves being released. Okay, and also 1915 is the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Ku Klux Klan, which is founded December 24th, 1865 in Pulaski, Tennessee, about a week after the 13th Amendment is ratified. It was ratified, it was adopted December 18th, 1865. The 13th Amendment was ratified December 6th, 1865, okay? So you have to understand that chronology and how pivotal 1915 was. And the movie, The Birth of a Nation, is going to rejuvenate the Ku Klux Klan as well. Okay, so race movies have first appeared during the silent movie era in the aftermath of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. More than any other movie in history, D.W. Griffith's Civil War epic, with its images and marauding Negro troops, power-mad mulattoes, and lusty black bucks, sent shockwaves through Black America, galvanizing its leaders into an uproar of protest and action, because there were race riots. That movie calls race riots in the streets. When you study The Birth of a Nation, it calls race riots in the streets. And African Americans were protesting against the movie. The NAACP, William Monroe Trotter in Boston, Massachusetts, are leading protests against this movie. The NAACP launched a formal protest movement against the film, setting up boycotts and picket lines. And soon there appeared a group of independent Black filmmakers, Emmett J. Scott, the brothers George and Noble Johnson. George and Noble Johnson are going to own the, what was the name of their company they own? I think it was the Lincoln company they own, but these are some of the most famous ones, George and Noble Johnson. And the legendary Oscar Micheaux, who scrambled for money from the Black bourgeoisie or white backers, and quickly formed production companies determined to make all Black films that stress Black America's achievements. Their first films, The Realization of a Negro's Ambition, in 1916. 1916, the year after The Birth of a Nation comes out. Their first films, The Realization of a Negro's Ambition. Trooper K of Troop K. Trooper K of Troop K, 1916. The Birth of a Race, 1918, and The Birth of a Race was a response to the birth of a nation. And The Homesteader of 1919, all initially serious tributes to Black endurance and Black ambition, were important mainly because they proved that Black cinema could exist. Now, 1919 is the year of the Red Summer. The Red Summer is the year after World War I ended in 1918. And in 1919, you have over 25 major race riots in this country, okay? And it was James Weldon Johnson of the NAACP who named it the Red Summer because the streets of America were flowing with blood. Afterward, scores of other film companies, the Rio Productions, R-E-O-L, the Rio Productions, the Unique Film Company, the Norman Film Manufacturing Company, the Frederick Douglass Film Company, some African-American owned, others white controlled, sprang up in places as diverse as Jacksonville, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, and New York, New York, often using the abandoned studios of mainstream film companies that had moved to California. Their low-budget films, frequently technically crude and mishapen, were shown at segregated theaters in the South, at big city ghetto movie houses in the North, and on occasion at Black churches, schools, and social gatherings, almost any place where it was possible to reach a Black audience. Before this movement of independence ended, approximately 150 such companies had come into existence and hundreds of films had been produced. These are called race movies, okay? There was a whole genre. We had all different types of movies. We had love stories, action movies, mysteries, westerns, all different types. Dorothy Dandridge starred in the movie Carmen Jones in 1958. Before she was in Carmen Jones, she was in the race movies. A lot of these movies, probably most of these movies, were in black and white. Lena Horne was in the race movies. Okay, so a lot of these actors and actresses that we know of who get into the white movies coming from the big production companies, okay, the big studios, they were in race movies before that. Okay, so check this book out. There's a whole deep, rich history behind this that most of us don't know. Okay, but the media that we value, the media we decide to give the interview to, says a lot about what we think about ourselves and what we think about our people. Okay, how you doing, Loretta, Carl, Cynthia? And then also a lot of them are quick to give interviews to TMZ as well. Okay, let me just take a quick look at my notes here. Okay. Make sure I hit all these points. All right. But this is an ongoing problem. Now, also, I tied this to what happened in North Carolina. So you may have seen a broadcast I did a few months ago dealing with a North Carolina school district that voted not to have a mandatory African-American history course. And everybody was all up in arms over this and crying foul things. Some of you all may have seen the broadcast. And I went in depth into this issue, and I shared comments from the school board as well as from activists in the community. So I think the first article I saw dealing with this was called North Carolina School Board Rejects Required African-American History Class in Controversial Vote. North Carolina School Board rejects required African-American history class in controversial vote, right? When you read this and like really do the research in the, I'll post a link here to the YouTube video of the broadcast that I did. It talked about how students in a North Carolina school district won't be required to take an African-American history course after a controversial decision. The Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools Board of Education struck down a proposal to offer a mandatory class according to video of the meeting. The 7-1 vote came just before district leaders unanimously approved continuing the district's so-called infusion plan, which included the addition of multicultural course offerings for high schoolers. When you read this, the cultural infusion plan includes an African-American history class at the high school level, but it's an elective and not mandatory. And a lot of the reporting on this, that gets left out. So one of the things I said was, well, even though we want it to be mandatory, the people who are saying they want the African-American history class to be mandatory, are you mandating that your children and your grandchildren and your nieces and nephews and cousins take this elective course? If you want them to get the knowledge, the class is being offered. So are you mandating that they take this elective course? Or does it have to be mandated from the school district that you take this African-American history course before you mandate it for your children? Where are your values, your interests, and your principles? The school board's adoption of the inclusion plan introduces courses for African American studies, Latin American studies, American Indian studies, and ethnic literature. According to a school board document, they would all be electives, the journal reports. Okay, so I went through and I looked at responses from community activists. I looked at a number of different information. I provide those sources in the video I did. Oftentimes, we will protest to get something. And then when we get it, we don't utilize it like we said we needed it. Oftentimes, we'll protest and raise hell to get something. Then when we get it, we don't utilize it like we said we needed it. Now they have, so if your issue is, and I agree with this, African American children need to know their history. There should be a waiting list to get into this class that is being offered. There should be a waiting list to get into this class. The number of African American children who are on the waiting list to get this class should be so overwhelming that they say, okay, look, we need to hire more teachers. We need to order more textbooks. You know, we need to probably make this mandatory. In some of the articles that I read, activists in the community were saying that we're going to use recreational centers and things like this to teach our history. Well, hell, you should be doing that now. They have to tell you no for you to realize you should do that. So read this article, and then I'll post a link here, because the other thing is, I saw some other articles written about this, and people were like really misrepresenting what took place. And very few times did they say that an elective class was offered in African American history. You know, so I was talking to Professor James Small one day. And Professor Small said, and you see him in the Hidden Colors documentaries, we're in Elementary Genocide, Part 3 from director Raheem Shabazz. It's Professor Small, myself, and Professor Kaba Kamene. We're all in that documentary. I was talking to Professor Small one day, and he said, it seems like many of our people have a perpetual need to protest. A perpetual need to protest. And what a lot of us don't understand is protesting is good, but you also have to protect the gains that you made. That you also have to protect the gains that were reaped from the protests. So many of us may understand the protesting part, but once we get something, we don't understand the concept of protecting it. We don't understand it can be taken away. Yvonne said, why do we pass up our own media at award shows? That says a lot about what we think about ourselves. This is why the foundation, this is part of the reason why I do what I do. Because you know, what you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. The foundation is our history and our culture. It gives us our self-esteem, our self-development, our self-worth. People who respect themselves do not allow other people to disrespect themselves. At the same time, let's be honest, okay? At the same time, if you watch my broadcasts, if you watch my lectures, things like that, you may ask yourself, why doesn't Michael Imhotep use the N-word? Why doesn't he call our people the N-word? Because I have too much respect for our people. I know and I understand the origins of the word, and I understand how you use dehumanizing terms. You put pejorative, negative terms on the people to dehumanize them, to then justify their mistreatment. If you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, and I have the book here somewhere. It's in one of these stacks of books here. I can't get to it. If you read Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy, this is something she talks about in the book. When you study the history of the transatlantic slave trade, and you've got to read Golden Age of the Moor. When we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, we can't talk about, let's see, where is that? See, I have to get a bookshelf to put behind me so I can just reach back here and get the book, okay? So if you read Golden Age of the Moor, which is edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and if you study the teachings from Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay, who's a history professor at Berea College, last time I checked. I need to do another interview with him because I interviewed him back in 2010. Dr. Jose Pimenta Bay used to teach classes on the history of the Moors at Temple University where Dr. Malefikete Asante is. The dehumanization of African people didn't start with the transatlantic slave trade. We see it happening with the Moors in Europe. And we see going back to about the 13th century, we see the way the names that were put on the Moors, we see them starting to be changed. And this is changing the way Europeans are thinking about the Moors and dehumanizing them. The dehumanization of African people that allowed the transatlantic slave trade to happen didn't start in 1441 when the transatlantic slave trade starts with the Portuguese going into Mauritania. Transatlantic slave trade starts with 1441. Doesn't start in Ghana, doesn't start in Sierra Leone, doesn't start in the Gambia. The Portuguese are going into Mauritania 1441. Unfortunately, oftentimes the way the story is told, we are under the impression that this is when Europeans first came into contact with African people. No, they had been dealing with Africans for hundreds of years. Just looking at the occupation of the Moors. I'm not talking about Greece and Rome invading Kemet. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about them going into the Nile Valley region of Africa. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, let's look at hundreds of years before the transatlantic slave trade starts in the mid 15th century. They were dealing with waves of Moors, of African Moors coming into Europe, going through Morocco, and right above Morocco is Spain and Portugal. Okay. So, and they're going all throughout Europe. They're going into Spain, Portugal, and at the time when they go into 711 AD, it's called the Iberian Peninsula. It's not called Spain and Portugal. That doesn't exist at that time. They're going into France, Prague, Czechoslovakia, Sicily, Italy, Germany. They're going to Germany, Austria, England. They go all throughout Europe. So if you read this book right here from Runoko Rashidi, Runoko goes deep into this, okay? Black Star, the African Presence in Early Europe. So, you know, I do an online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We go deep into this history. So when we look at something like Meghan Markle, and we look at Meghan Markle marrying Prince Harry, and before they got married, Meghan Markle met with his family members, and she met with Princess Michael of Kent, K-E-N-T. And this is something I talk about in the class. I show people this article. And if you remember back when this took place, I think this was 2017. This was like when they announced their engagement, but it was before they got married. Princess Michael of Kent showed up to it was a lunch or something like that, where they were going to meet. And she was wearing a brooch, and it was called Blackmore Jewelry or Blackamoor Jewelry, okay? Dailymail.co.uk has an article about this. See, this is an example of history in the headlines. All of this history is connected. We try to look at it incrementally, or we try to segment the history. But as Professor Kaba Kamene correctly teaches us, to understand the existence of something, you must first understand the pre-existence of existence. Okay? So he taught me you have to understand, see, historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of historical events. So if we look at this article, and then I'll turn on the screen share here. This is from dailymail.co.uk. Distressed Princess Michael of Kent apologizes for wearing a racist blackamoor brooch to meet Meghan at the Queen's Christmas lunch and promises to retire it. All right. Blackamoor jewelry comes out of a history. And let me see, there's a video that's trying to play. I'm trying to close this video here. Let me bring up this article. We got ads popping up here. Okay, let's look at this. Let's go back to the article here. Okay, let me turn on the screen share so you can see this. This is an example of history in the headlines, and a lot of times we'll see these stories and don't really understand how they tie into history. Distressed Princess Michael of Kent apologizes for wearing a racist blackamoor brooch to meet Meghan at the Queen's Christmas lunch and promises to retire it. This is from December 22nd, 2017. Okay. And let's see here. It talks about, let me see, can I close this stuff here? So Princess Michael of Kent has apologized after coming under fire for wearing a blackamoor brooch to the Queen's Christmas lunch. Okay, let's look at the brooch, right? So we see a picture of it here, right? And we see the brooch. It has a person with a black face. Princess Michael of Kent found herself under fire yesterday after she wore a blackamoor brooch to the Queen's Christmas lunch at Buckingham Palace, attended by Prince Harry's mixed race fiance Meghan Markle. So this is how they refer to her, as mixed race, right? Here's a close up of it, of the brooch. Let's scroll down. Blackamoor 18th century art and jewelry linked to racial conquest. Now here's another picture of a Moor. Blackamoor art in Shirley Bassey's bedroom. Blackamoor jewelry and art was extremely popular in the 18th century, the 1700s. The Moors lose control of their last stronghold in Europe, which was Granada in Spain, January 2nd, 1492. But they are now considered to be highly racially insensitive, and the word blackamoor has been condemned as a term of abuse for anyone with a dark skin. In recent years, there have been petitions for galleries and hotels to remove them. Blackamoors first emerged during the Middle Ages when Europeans first encountered the Moors, dark-skinned Muslims from North Africa and the Middle East who came to occupy various parts of the continent. All the Moors were not Muslims. That's inaccurate. All the Moors, the majority of them were. You had Moors who practiced traditional African spiritual systems. You had Moors who were Christians as well, like Saint Maurice, who became a patron saint of Germany. He was a Moor as well. The African figure is typically depicted with a turban, dressed in lavish jewels, and are commonly fixed in positions of servitude, such as footmen or waiters. They are usually carved from ebony or painted black in the case of porcelain. While they became an art form in the 17th and 18th centuries, particularly in Italy, many believe the figures suggest racial conquest, which they do, because the reason why they are shown in servitude when it was the African Moors who go into Europe and bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. They introduced something called alchemy, today we call chemistry. They introduced all different types of new surgical procedures. They introduced algebra and alcohol and rice and sugar. All these things that the Moors introduced into Europe is going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages, okay? And it's going to lead to the transatlantic slave trade happening. The reason why they are shown in servitude is because they were conquered by Europeans, okay? So it's the same reason why on the national flags of Corsica and Sardinia, they have Moors' heads. And originally those Moors heads, they wear bandanas today. Originally they were blindfolds to signify that the Moors had been conquered, that they were prisoners. This is what the art signifies, but it ties into a deep history. But this is a history that predates the transatlantic slave trade. But if you don't understand this history that predates it, you'll look at the transatlantic slave trade episodically as an episode in history, as opposed to looking at it chronologically. The transatlantic slave trade is really Europeans getting revenge on Africans for what happened in Europe for hundreds of years with the Africans and the Moors, the African Moors and Europeans. The other thing is that the African Moors were intermixing into the European bloodline, changing the complexion of many Europeans. This is how you get somebody like Queen Charlotte Sophia, okay, who was the wife of King George III. Who was King George III? King George III was the king that the 13 colonies are revolting against during the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 1783. And then they're going to have the Philadelphia Convention, the Constitutional Convention of 1787, to draft and vote on the US Constitution that they're arguing about in Congress today with the impeachment of Donald Trump. Those 13 colonies were fighting against King George III, and his wife was Queen Charlotte Sophia, who was of Moorish ancestry on her mother's side. This history is deep. But as Dr. John Henry Clarke taught us, all history is a current event. Everything that has ever happened continues to happen in some shape, form, or fashion. Okay, let's see where we are. Okay, let's restart that page. Okay, how's everybody doing? All right, while that page restarts. So African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. So it is 2020. And a lot of people want to get their financial house in order, and certified financial planner Martisha Patterson can help you with this. She has over 20 years in the wealth management industry. She will help you apply proven tools, techniques, and strategies so you can meet your financial goals. Okay, you can get a free consultation with her as well if you contact her at area code 646-552-4384, 646-552-4384, or visit her website, PattersonPlans17.com, PattersonPlans17.com. Let her know you found out about this from the African History Network. You've seen the interviews I've done with Martisha Patterson. She has some really good information. A lot of people are looking for something to read, and author Teresa Roseman has something for you. The book, She Remembered Her Path, is a poem which centers on a female character named Sheteria. Now, Sheteria is a woman who finds herself in trouble. Now, how many women have not found themselves in trouble? Okay, I'm not talking about that type of trouble. I'm just saying in trouble. She feels she cannot make decisions that were simple in her younger life. The fear is she has stepped off the path she has created and now needs guidance to return to her confident self. Find out what happens to Sheteria in the book, She Remembered Her Path, from author Teresa Roseman. It's available at Amazon.com in book form and Kindle form. It's also available at Barnes & Noble and on eBay as well. All right, so let's continue here. Everybody share this broadcast on your Facebook page. How's everybody doing? Okay, I think we're still broadcasting. Okay, Samsara Queens, okay, said, I'm a first-time viewer. Well, I have seen the platform for a while, but it's my first time engaging. I wish I could, but I am a busy homeschool mom and doctoral student, exhausted, laughing out loud. Okay, how you doing, Samsara? Okay, so be sure to subscribe here. For those who are into homeschooling, so you know, I'm a supporter of homeschooling, but also I'm not against traditional public schools, because I know the majority of African-American children are going to be still educated at public schools, but homeschooling can augment what they learn and supplement what they learn in traditional public schools. So I encourage people to visit liberatedmindsexpo.com, liberatedmindsexpo.com. That is the website of the Liberated Minds Black Homeschooling Education Expo. Okay, that takes place the third weekend in July each year in Atlanta. So you know the third weekend in July, I'm there because I'm usually one of the presenters, okay? And I've been, so 2019 was the 8th annual expo. I've been to 7 of them, and I've spoken at 6 of them, all right? So a lot of the experts in homeschooling African-American children from an African-centered perspective, because it's different than homeschool, because you can homeschool African-American children from a Eurocentric perspective, or you can homeschool them from an African-centered perspective, okay? So this is homeschooling African-American children from an African-centered perspective, all right? There's a difference. And you have a lot of workshops, you have speakers, you have experts in homeschooling African-American children, those who have schools. So it's not just people like talking about theory and they never taught African-American children. It's those who are actually doing the work. Okay, so check that out, liberatedmindsexpo.com. Let's see. Okay, she said, thanks for your recommendation. Okay, we got Maya, so deep rabbit hole, Maya said, okay. All right. So check out this article here from dailymail.co.uk. This deals with Blackmore jury, okay? Somebody asked, was Queen Charlotte Black or African? Yes, she was. Queen Charlotte Sophia. There's a book that was written in the last couple of years about her, numerous articles also. And Queen Charlotte was the, she's an ancestor to Queen Elizabeth, the current queen, now Queen Elizabeth. I forgot, I think that was, I think she's the great grandmother of Queen Elizabeth. I can't remember, but she's a relative of her, blood relative. Let me take a look at this here. Let me look at another slide because I have this in my slides, and I also deal with this in my presentations dealing with the history of Christmas also. So let's look at something here. And we know African American History Month is coming up quickly, so I have a 15 DVD bundle pack available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It deals with a lot of my lectures dealing with African American history and African history. So that's on sale now. It's like a $250 value on sale of $100. Let me look at this here. I can tell you exactly what it is. And I also deal with Queen Charlotte Sophia in my presentation, Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization. Okay, so we'll look for that. Let's see, who else do we have here before we get out of here? Be sure to listen to the African History Network show Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We broadcast here on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and I'm also on 9-10 a.m. the Superstation WFDF in Detroit. If you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization, especially for African American History Month, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Then also you can give us a call, area code 313-462-0003, 313-462-0003. But email us and we'll make it happen, whether it's in-state or out-of-state. I'm speaking at a number of places, speaking at Detroit Unity Temple Church, Sunday, February 2nd. I'm speaking at their 10 a.m. service, and then I'm doing a workshop there from, I think it's 12:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Okay, so Queen Charlotte Sophia, Queen Victoria the First was one of her daughters. Queen Victoria I was one of her daughters. And if I remember correctly, that is a ancestor of Queen Elizabeth, if I remember correctly. Okay, we have Loretta, Chaz, Carl. Just a few of the people watching us here. All right, let me post a link here for the a bundle pack dealing with African American History Month. This year's theme for African American History Month is African Americans and the Vote. There's an annual theme each year. Okay, so when I do my lectures during African American History Month, I deal with the origins of it, going back to Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So we really understand, because unfortunately, a lot of people celebrate this monthly cultural celebration, but don't really understand why it was created, don't understand what it is that we're celebrating. There's an annual theme each year, which comes from the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. ASALH is the organization that Dr. Carter G. Woodson co-founded September 9th, 1915 in Chicago. Okay, ASALH, Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And the annual theme gives purpose and direction for this monthly cultural celebration, as opposed to us just recycling the same 15 to 20 sanitized Negroes every year, which unfortunately is what a lot of people do. And we deal with personalities as opposed to understanding a chronology of history and understanding how conditions and certain historical events shape a historical figure. Okay, we focus too much on the first African American to do this, or African American athletes and celebrities, and don't understand a chronology of the history and the conditions that created these icons. The other thing is African American History Month was not just created for us to learn and study the accomplishments and achievements of African Americans in this country and inventions and different things like this, but also on the continent of Africa and throughout the diaspora. So a lot of times we'll just deal with history here in the US, when we really should be dealing with the history of African people on the continent, their accomplishments and achievements in their history on the continent of Africa, and also throughout the diaspora. So we understand how all of this history is connected. All right, so look, we're going to get out of here. Also, if you want to donate to the African History Network, paypal.me/the AHN show, or $ the AHN show through Cash App. Okay, that helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting. You can purchase our DVD lectures as well. We have a lot of them shipping out this week. All right. Look, we have to get out of here. Hey, remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. Peace.